Welcome back to the second week of Bite Size Alpha, and this week we're going to be looking at who is Jesus. Was he just a myth? Well, that's certainly what the Russian Communist Dictionary defined him as, a mythical figure that never existed. But there's lots of evidence for the existence of Jesus outside of what we read within the Bible. So Tacitus, a Roman historian, one of the most renowned Roman historians, writes about the death of Jesus at the hands of Pontius Pilate, which is unusual as most history was only written about emperors and kings. Josephus, who was a Jewish historian, wrote this: "And there arose about this time Jesus, a wise man, if indeed we should call him a man, for he was a doer of marvellous deeds, a teacher of men who received the truth with pleasure. He led away many of the Jews, and also many of the Greeks. This man was the so-called Christ. And when Pilate had condemned him to the cross on his impeachment by the chief men among us, those who had loved him at first did not cease. For he appeared to them, as they said, on the third day, alive again, the divine prophets having spoken these and thousands of other wonderful things about him. And even now, the tribe of Christians, so named after him, has not yet died out." So Josephus gives us the date of Jesus' death, his crucifixion under Pilate, his reputation as a miracle worker, his crucifixion at the instigation of the Jewish rulers, the chief men among us, his claim that he was the Messiah, the claim that he'd risen from the dead, and that he was a founder of a new group called the Christians. All of this from a non-Christian perspective. But there are other writers, people like Marabar Serapion, who was writing to his son, and this is a letter that we now have in the British Museum, and within the letter he includes the details that Jesus was executed by the Jews. The Babylonian Talmud records that Jesus was crucified on the eve of Passover, and there's more. Suetonius, who was a bit of a gossiper of his day, writing all sorts of things, maybe the equivalent of a tabloid, and Pliny, a Roman governor, writing about Christians, all from a non-Christian or even an anti-Christian perspective. Jesus existed, and his claims were extraordinary, acknowledged even by the writers of other faiths. So these other historical texts corroborate what we see written about Jesus in the New Testament. Then, outside of the writings, there's the archaeology, with monuments and inscriptions that corroborate the names and titles of individuals in authority that are named in the New Testament, like Pilate or Gallio, the proconsul of Corinth. The archaeology also confirms that the details of the descriptions of the temple in Jerusalem are accurate, meaning that the authors of these Gospels had detailed knowledge of the temple before it was destroyed in AD 70. One last thing that adds credibility to the biblical account is that it often paints the followers of Jesus in a bad light. They repeatedly got things wrong and argued among themselves. They ran away and deserted him in his darkest hour. And Peter, the leader of the apostles, denied that he even knew Jesus. These were the people who went on to share the good news about Jesus. And if the Gospels were fabrications, then the leaders of the movement would surely have wanted to paint themselves in a better light. All this gives confidence that we can trust the content of the Bible to have been written by eyewitnesses. Eyewitnesses to the fact that Jesus lived and taught and did some amazing things before he was killed on a cross. So we can't say that Jesus was just a myth. Any serious historian would agree that 2,000 years ago there was a man named Jesus who lived and died on a cross. The question that we need to explore is whether he died and then lived. Before we get to that, it's important to ask if Jesus was just a good teacher, or was he, like so many others that had gone before him, a prophet of God? But all these questions we're going to tackle as we go through this week. I hope you can join us.